Hello.
Welcome back to the Space School. Today we'll be doing the long-awaited What If Anakin Skywalker Was a Mandalorian. Before we begin, special thanks to all of our patrons. If you want to support me in other ways, all the links are listed down below.
Our story begins on the planet Mandalore, inside of the capital city of Sonuri. A boy by the name of Anakin was born into the once powerful House Skywalker. As a Mandalorian child, he would soon come to learn of its warrior past.
Anakin Skywalker being born into the House of Skywalker on Mandalore was a great honor. Anakin's father was named Thej Skywalker and his wife being Shmi Skywalker. The Skywalker lineage on Mandalore was one of warriors and of pride. While they no longer were warriors, it didn't mean they forsake their ways. They only learned to adapt. Unlike those on the moon of Concordia, House Skywalker recognized the importance of change within Mandalorian society. Like many of their friends, family, and neighbors across the capital city, and even the planet of Mandalore, they embraced the new way of the Mandalore. The planet had been through hell on numerous occasions, being destroyed through wars and even civil wars, and now it was on the galactic stage representing itself as a peaceful planet. As Thej would explain, it was through the very powerful House Kryze that this was possible. House Kryze had two daughters, one of them being Bo-Katan and the other one being Satine. They were sisters, though one of the sisters, by the time Anakin was born, had become Duchess of Mandalore. She was very young to be thrusted into the role of power, but she took the role with maturity and delicacy. When Anakin was born, the Duchess of Mandalore was being protected by a group of Jedi Knights. Well, one of them was a master and the other one was a Padawan. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi were brought to Mandalore to protect Satine from assassins. Thej and Shmi Skywalker both understood that not everyone saw eye to eye with Satine and her ways, but the truth is, it was her and her ways that allowed Mandalore to be respected across the galaxy. Previously, people would have ended up fighting with Mandalore, as they always had, and it typically didn't have a positive result for Mandalore. While House Kryze was all-powerful, they took in the reins and turned away from the true Mandalorian path, a path of warriors and honor for a path of peace and compassion. House Skywalker respected this decision, though through the years they never gave up on their legacy. The Skywalkers always practiced in moderation to what belonged of their warrior past. They never went overboard, but their armor remained as a decorative piece inside of their estates, and their training was kept quiet. Though truthfully, many of the members of House Skywalker would become guardsmen for the leadership of Mandalore, currently that being a duchess. It was a way for them to embrace both their tradition but their culture as in this moment in history. House Skywalker was devoted to the people of Mandalore, and they wanted to do best to serve the people of Mandalore however they could, because rebellious behaviors and the inability to see that different times call for different actions displays a level of immaturity, and House Skywalker wasn't that. House Skywalker was relatively close to aristocracy, whereas they held a lot of political power, but they also had a lot of economical power. House Skywalker was quite close with House Kryze, and that had been a long-standing tradition, though in recent years House Skywalker became distant from House Vizsla, because the new name in the Vizsla family was rather rancid. He wasn't on Mandalore, often because he spent most of his time on Concordia, one of Mandalore's moons, working his hardest to rise through the ranks of the planet. Instead of House Skywalker would be taught to little Anakin very on the importance of the House Skywalker values. Their values were true loyalty to the Mandalorians, but that didn't mean the way. As Thej would describe it, House Skywalker was loyal to the people of Mandalore, but not a particular code of ethics, because people, as well as policies, do change. And House Skywalker continuously was able to evolve with that. In the olden days, they were powerful warriors. In the modern days, they were powerful aristocrats who served as best as they could for the people of Mandalore. Of course, in coordination with the Duchess. Because Thej and Shmi were close to House Kryze, they knew of the falling out between the two sisters, and they were very aware of the attempts on Satine's life, which during this time would have Thej away from his wife and his son to help protect the Duchess. Thej would do this by actively searching for the assassins, while the Jedi Padawan did everything in his own power to make sure that the Duchess was safe. And because Thej was a member of House Skywalker, the modern and completely improved house, he had no long-standing issues with the Jedi, something Skywalker would teach to his son about rivalries and how unimportant they were. The mission to defend the Duchess would be an overbearing success, and she would have the luxury of returning to her palace and continue to help support the growth of her people through her policy and her endeavors as a true leader. When Thej returned to his home, he and Shmi began discussing their plans for teaching Anakin, because someday it would be Anakin who would have the power of the family. He was an only child and he simply would become the sole patriarch of the family. When Anakin was old enough, as per tradition inside of House Skywalker, Thej and Shmi would teach him the ways of their ancestors. While typically this training wasn't as deadly as it was in the past, it was based off of a more self-defensive form. The Mandalorians had a name for it, but House Skywalker referred to it as Kiado, way of the harmonizing energy. This method would be taught because it wasn't inherently violent, and instead of it being violent, it focused on an individual's ability to defend themselves physically. This was something taught to Anakin very early on, because it would help him with coordination with his body and handling how it affected him. Of course, as he grew up, his style would have to change, but his flexibility and maneuverability were something both of his parents highlighted for him early in his life. When Anakin turned 13, his father would take him to their balcony. House Skywalker looked over much of the capital city, had a view of the palace, and it saw all the major locations. Thej sat his son down and started talking to him.
You see all of this, Anakin? This is your home. The path of Skywalker is the path of the Mandalorian, but do not misconstrue its true meaning. To be a Skywalker is to walk the path of harmony, because our power as Mandalorians doesn't come from our strength but our compassion. We're strongest not on the offense but on the defense, because as Skywalkers our duty is to our people, because our people are family.
Anakin looked at all across the city. His father was a wise man, and his values struck to the core of Anakin. The boy loved his father, and the same feeling from his father down to his boy. Anakin knew that he would be important like his dad someday. But until that day, he would continue to aspire to be like him, because to Anakin, his father was like Superman. He couldn't be hurt, and he couldn't be stopped. He didn't break, but he knew compassion. He knew love, and he showed that more than any of his power. Because Thej Skywalker was a true Mandalorian, not obsessed with power, but obsessed with what he could do without putting people beneath him. Something Anakin's father often repeated around him was what Thej called the House Skywalker motto.
There's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self.
Thej understood that, and so did Shmi. She held those same values near and dear to her heart, and she shared them with her son as much as Thej did. Though Shmi and Anakin's relationship was a bit different than Thej and Anakin's relationship, because oftentimes Thej did have to leave to assist in politics or even stopping other attempts to ruse the power structure under Duchess Satine. All that time away made Anakin and Shmi's bond tighter in many ways, but separated in others. There were times of disconnect, but they typically occurred naturally. Shmi often taught Anakin things that Thej couldn't, because he wasn't around, though by no means did this make House Skywalker dysfunctional. It was entirely functional, but it was tough. It couldn't be broken, nor could it be torn apart. Regardless, as Anakin got through older age, he was able to attend the best academies on Mandalore. These academies weren't militaristic by any means, but they on the other hand were built for intelligence. Something Duchess Satine had focused on a lot during her rule was the growth of the young minds and their focus on studies, because they were integral to the growth of a civilization. Satine wanted Mandalore to be seen on the galactic stage as an inspiration, having the ability to acknowledge their warrior past, but move beyond it because Mandalore's people were capable of it, because Mandalore's people were tough, not through sheer strength, but they were emotionally powerful, they were intelligently tough, they were everything that could inspire those around them. Satine's vision had flaws, because no vision is without flaw, but her vision was very positively leading Mandalore into the future. When Anakin turned 18, he was gifted his first full bodysuit of Mandalorian armor. While House Skywalker refrained from the way of the true Mandalore, it didn't mean they didn't carry out ceremony or tradition. When their children became adults, they would receive armor made of Beskar. It wasn't true Beskar because, truthfully, the armor would become a decorative piece, just like the armor that belonged to those from House Skywalker from before and after. It was often for display, because they didn't need it. The strength of Skywalker came through their mental toughness, not their physical toughness. But they had in any circumstance of which they would need it. Anakin's suit of armor would be strong in some places, but not all of them. Mainly being that his helmet was well protected, because, well, it was a helmet, with 90% true Beskar. Anakin's forearms were made of 85% true Beskar, and Anakin's chest piece was around 89 round up to 90% true Beskar, similarly to the helmet. Thej and Shmi believed that if there were any reason for Anakin to use it, which they never thought there would be, then he would be highly protected, especially in using Kiado. While Anakin had received a lot of formal training in Mandalorian weaponry through Shmi and Thej, he would require more training. His Mandalorian armor came equipped with several pieces that Anakin never worked with, and Anakin would have to learn how to use them. For example, his helmet had a rangefinder, which was kind of self-explanatory, but, still something that needed practice. Something else that he needed to learn was how to use his grapple, for another example. For Anakin, he would enjoy his suit of armor, but he would also rejoice in passing the academy. When he finished, he would spend time with his father and mother as they went down on political business on behalf of Mandalore and on behalf of Satine. Anakin had several interactions with Duchess Satine, and he saw her in each of those interactions to be very positive. She had a very lovely presence, but even in her serenity, she demanded excellence. She may have been peaceful, but she, as a person, exuded the best of what, in Anakin's eyes, a Mandalorian could become. While Anakin's first year outside of the academy would be great, it wouldn't last long because the Clone Wars would fire off into a rapid start. With Thej and Shmi being as close to Satine as they would be among the first to know that Mandalore was setting up itself to be a coalition of neutral systems. While Mandalore normally associated itself with the Republic, they wouldn't join the war on its behalf. Duchess Satine and her advisors and political consultants during this time would be working overload, and Anakin would be thrown right into the middle of it, considering he was shadowing his parents while they were working with Satine, because Satine quickly made it evident to the galaxy that Mandalore would not be partaking in a war. They'd be sitting on the sidelines because to Satine and those around her, they believed war wouldn't settle anything and exasperate the issues between the Republic and the now acclaimed Confederacy. Anakin would learn a lot about the Mandalorian political atmosphere during this time of high stress. It would be clearly evident what their goal was, and they stood tall while professing their position to the galaxy. They had no fear of anyone, though for Thej, he was starting to notice an issue with one of Mandalore's moons, that being now Governor Vizsla of Concordia. He was a bit belligerent, and so, on a mission, Anakin and Thej would leave the capital of Mandalore and Sundari and head towards Concordia. To preface, this mission wasn't on behalf of the Duchess Satine. This mission was on behalf of Thej and House Skywalker. He believed there was something awry with Vizsla. Thej knew that there was something incredibly off with the governor, and so he, with his son, left Mandalore. They would depart in their Mandalorian gear, because there was no purpose in not being defended. Thej was fairly aware that there was a possibility of the Death Watch being on Concordia, and he didn't believe at all that Pre Vizsla was a part of it, but he did believe that it was being covered up by Pre Vizsla because Vizsla saw Satine as a political rival. In Thej's mind, he assumed that Pre Vizsla wanted to allow Death Watch to create a bad image for Satine, and from that bad image, he could assume control over the throne of Mandalore. The funny thing is while Thej was mostly right about Vizsla, it was more so that Vizsla wanted to destroy and kill Satine and take her throne with force. Something that wouldn't actually work too well for people who were relatively loyal to her, especially considering she provided them the freedom from the troubles of the Clone War. Regardless, as Anakin and his father landed on Concordia, they departed in separate directions. Both of them were wearing nearly shiny Mandalorian armor. Anakin had never used his in open combat, and now he was in the field with it. Thej told Anakin to follow a trail to an abandoned mine on the planet. In the meantime, he would go out searching for the camp of Mandalorian purists and see if he could sort things out, reminding his son to be wary. The Mandalorians tended not to be as diplomatic as Satine. Anakin nodded his head and made his way down the path. Thej used his jetpack and took off using the air to his advantage to see everything beneath him. His son had a jetpack, but he refrained from using it for the time being because he really wanted to keep a low profile. If he entered the abandoned mine after using it, and there were people there, then they would likely be alerted to his presence. When Anakin eventually got to the mine, he heard voices talking. So, he used a slight diversion to draw the attention of those inside the facility, to move away from the interior. When he used this divergence, a group of Death Watch members came running out. Anakin knew Death Watch by their reputation, but he hadn't ever seen them with his own eyes. His father talked about them before, telling him that they were a group of insurgents, and they were not to be trifled with. One of the members of Death Watch was Satine's sister, and Thej made a point to Anakin to stay away from her because she was a fierce warrior. Anakin hid behind a conveyor belt and made his way up to the facility line. When he got to the main room, he saw tons of weaponry, and he also saw tons of supplies. They were building an army here. Anakin knew he couldn't just let this slide, because it could be turned into an invasion force. Not that Anakin feared the Death Watch could get to Sundari without being stopped, but he didn't want anyone getting hurt, and so he set some charges on the jetpacks and ran to the elevator in the main tunnel. On the other hand, Thej was outside on the base. He had been captured by Pre Vizsla's men, though the most recent member of House Vizsla was nowhere to be seen. Thej was shot down by a trio of Mandalorians who spotted him when he found the Death Watch base. When Anakin got to the top of the lift, he looked down and saw his father on his knees with his helmet removed and his face beaten, in the middle of the camp. He knew he had to be quick, now seeing the vile Death Watch and how vile they could be. Anakin lowered his rangefinder and scouted out the landscape below. He then saw a Mandalorian with different armor walk out from the shadows. He had a small cape around his shoulders, and there was 2 Mandalorians escorting him. Anakin raised his blaster and prepared to take the shot, when 4 Mandalorians pounced on his back, holding him down. Anakin reacted in fear, fighting back, and fighting without control and balance he was taught to fight with. He was able to beat back 2 of the Mandalorians, but the other 2 shoved his face into the dirt. On the ground, Anakin was able to see a confrontation between Vizsla and his father. Anakin watched Vizsla pull a weapon from his belt, and his eyes widened when he realized that it was a legendary Darksaber. The weapon ignited, and Anakin screamed out. Vizsla turned around, and from under his helmet he smiled as he dropped the Darksaber down in Thedge's neck, dropping Anakin's father's head to the ground. Anakin cried out in horror as Vizsla turned back and used his jetpack to get up to Anakin, to kill him too. The Mandalorians holding Anakin down picked him up to face Vizsla. When Vizsla got up there, he walked forward towards Skywalker and took off his helmet. He looked and saw a boy whose father he just killed. Pre-Vizsla laughed. He was disenchanted with the newly formerly powerful house of Skywalker. They used to be powerful warriors, proud warriors. Vizsla went on a typical antagonist monologue to see Anakin just wasn't going to listen to that. So, with one fell swoop, he jabbed his fist back and brought it around to his other hand and tapped it. Vizsla responded by whipping out the Darksaber and striking down hard on Anakin's shoulder. The Darksaber penetrated the Beskar, lodging itself into Anakin's shoulder, but not going through the entire limb. And then a massive explosion threw everyone off the ledge, throwing the Darksaber out of Skywalker's shoulder as he turned around and used his jetpack to fly back to the vessel he and his father landed in. Anakin assumed he would be followed, and so when he landed, he got into the ship and took off immediately. Anakin dropped his helmet on the cargo bay and flew the ship off of Concordia back to Mandalore. Tears were streaming down his face. He just saw his own father die, and it broke his heart. Anakin, when he got back to Sundari, ran out of the cockpit hysterical to the people on the landing deck. They all ran over to Skywalker. They all knew him, and they all saw him wearing traditional Mandalorian armor, which confused them. Anakin's energy dropped down as soon as he saw the people that could help him. The deckhands got a medical vessel and put him in it, and dispatched him immediately while calling Shmi. When Anakin eventually woke up, he was very confused. His arm was in a cast, and his mother was by his side. But there was also another woman in the room. It was Duchess Satine. She was a family friend after all, and she wanted to be sure that Anakin was alright. Anakin jumped up, but Shmi moved over to her son's side and kept him grounded, asking him how he felt. Anakin looked around. He wasn't wearing his armor. He found it in the corner of the room. Anakin turned back over and looked at his mother dead in the eyes, and told her the Death Watch killed his father.
The Death Watch killed Dad. They're animals, but we found them on Concordia.
Satine covered her mouth in sorrow as she came over to Anakin's other side. She spoke to Anakin in a very soft voice, the language of the old Mandalorian way, giving true remembrance to Thedge Skywalker for the man that he was and the effect that he had on those around him. When Satine finished, there were already tears streaming down Anakin's face. Satine was at conflict here. She knew Death Watch was a threat, but she also didn't actively want to incite a Mandalorian civil war. With one of the most well-known faces of Mandalore having been killed by the Death Watch, she needed to make a decision. Though Satine did have to leave, one of her old friends was paying a visit. Maybe Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi would be able to help her with this predicament. Satine told Anakin that she was very sorry for the loss of his father, and that she would do everything in her power to make sure it was righted. Anakin had a very small smile as he laid back down on the bed and looked at the ceiling, playing out the imagery in his mind. Anakin wouldn't be cleared to leave the hospital for a week, but after a week, Satine would learn of the man behind Thedge Skywalker's murder. It was Concordia's governor. The thing being, while Anakin saw Pre-Vizsla kill his father, he didn't know it was Pre-Vizsla. Under the armor, he just saw the armor. There was nothing for him to identify Pre-Vizsla because the truth is, there was no identifying his characteristics, and there was nothing for Anakin to recognize. The only time he interacted with Pre-Vizsla was when he was younger. Regardless, the culprit had been found and Satine was left with a decision, and how she would handle it. Though she was being dragged across the galaxy on a voyage with her good friend Obi-Wan, and a handful of senators to confront the Republic and inform them that she wasn't going to request aid from the Republic, which was now more of a troubling task because a well-known politician was just killed by the Death Watch. While Satine was across the galaxy, Anakin became obsessed with finding Vizsla and killing him, though Shmi told her son that giving in to anger would be against what his father wanted. The words Anakin's father said echoed out in his mind, being superior to your former self. true nobility. Anakin could never shake the words from his mind, but he knew what he needed to do. Shmi told her son that she would go with him to Concordia, but she was not going to if Anakin was going to do it out of hatred. The only way she would join him is if Anakin realized that this was for the greater good of Mandalore and not for vengeance, because that's why Tej was going there, for Mandalore, not for vengeance or political gain. He was going there to serve the best interests of his people, and Anakin should look to accomplish the same. When Anakin got his head together, he told Shmi that he was ready. His shoulder was certainly not the same, but Anakin was a Mandalorian, and even more than that, he was a Skywalker. He would take the fight to Pre Vizsla, and he would take the Darksaber for himself. Shmi told Anakin that she couldn't help him once he started the fight. The fight was between him and Vizsla, and that's all it could ever be. Though Shmi reminded Anakin that with Satine facing the Republic, doing this could actually really save the Mandalorians from being forced to join with the Republic. Anakin and Shmi departed using a political official vessel to head to Concordia to meet with Pre Vizsla inside of his castle. When Anakin landed, he looked over at his mother and told her,
No matter what, I love you. I'm gonna win this for Dad, and for Mandalore.
Anakin put on his helmet over his head as he stepped out of the vessel. Pre Vizsla expected to see the Prime Minister, Almec, but instead, he saw a Mandalorian wearing the crest of Skywalker. It was a son, returning for revenge. Anakin stepped off the platform of the ship, pointing at Pre Vizsla and saying,
Pre Vizsla, I challenge you to the right to wield the Darksaber.
Pre Vizsla grinned as he motioned Skywalker to follow him. Anakin's heart began to beat heavily. Shmi was wearing her customized armor as she followed her son forward. As they walked through the halls, Anakin was stopped while Pre Vizsla got his gear ready and prepared to kill the last Skywalker who could carry the name on. He thought this would be a great way to end the former friendship that existed between the two families, considering it used to be a great friendship that fizzled out because the Skywalkers simply couldn't keep to the way of the Mandalore, despicable in Vizsla's mind. When he was ready, he left the room and saw Anakin. Skywalker's rate jumped, butterflies in his stomach, but he trusted himself. He was so focused on becoming a victor that he didn't think about the possibility of defeat. Skywalker stepped back, and Pre Vizsla didn't give a remark to start the fight. He only lunged forward, igniting the Darksaber. All the built-up, pent-up emotions Anakin had faded immediately as he ducked out of the way, throwing a punch towards Vizsla but missing. They were tight hallways that they were fighting in as Vizsla turned around after cutting a part of his wall. The Mandalorians around watched. In one side of the hallway was Shmi and Bo-Katan, and the other, a couple of other Death Watch members. Skywalker watched Pre Vizsla jump at him, and so he used his jetpack to fly forward, throwing Pre Vizsla backwards and having him slam into the wall behind. Their fighting arena opened up as Pre Vizsla used his grapple and shot at Skywalker. It wrapped around Anakin's legs and toppled him over. Vizsla saw his victory as he lunged forward, swinging heavily, colliding with Anakin's helmet, throwing Anakin from his feet as he cried out in pain. Anakin tumbled backwards and slammed into the ground, as a cut revealed a hole in his helmet, revealing one eye and showing the now permanent scar that would reside on Skywalker's face. Anakin flipped backwards, dodging a swing by Pre Vizsla, and leapt to his feet. He looked at Vizsla and then at the Darksaber. Beneath Vizsla's mask there was a strong smile, as he knew that now he couldn't lose. Vizsla swung forward in eagerness to claim victory, but Anakin trusted what his father taught him. He moved forward and caught Vizsla's arm in a lock, and then moving from Kyoto, he lowered his plasma shockers on his knuckles and swung repeatedly into Vizsla's side, not just hitting the soft spot on the armor, but destroying the skin and under the skin breaking the kidneys in Vizsla's body. He cried out in pain as Anakin threw Vizsla backwards. Seeing his opportunities, he kicked Pre Vizsla in the chest, throwing him off of his feet. Vizsla tumbled to the ground as the Darksaber dropped to the floor. Anakin knew this wasn't the proper time to use the Darksaber as he grabbed it and put it on his belt, and then reached for his pistols, firing away as Pre Vizsla got to his feet and jumped out of the way, using his little shield on his wrist to defend himself. But Anakin was a straight shooter. He clipped Pre Vizsla in the helmet, throwing the Mandalorian warrior from his feet and dispatching his helmet to the edge of the hallway. Skywalker ignited the Darksaber as he stepped forward over Pre Vizsla, kicking him in the jaw, completely dislocating it, and speaking up, saying,
This isn't for my father. This is for Mandalore.
Anakin dropped the Darksaber as Vizsla's head rolled to the ground. Anakin turned around and pointed the saber at the Mandalorians in the room, telling them,
Now kneel. I am the Mandalore now. You will bow before me. You will no longer be pathetic insurgents. You will have virtues. You will relearn everything that you have lost. Bo-Katan, kneel. There will be no favorites. No ridiculous shows of unearned strength. You will not betray our people.
Skywalker pointed the Darksaber at Bo-Katan and then sheathed the weapon. Anakin stepped forward, kicking the head of Pre Vizsla to the side as he told his mother they needed to get a message to Duchess Satine. They made their way for the communication device as Anakin prepared to speak into it, saying,
I am Anakin Skywalker, heir to House Skywalker on Mandalore. We have defeated the insurgents who have tried to terrorize us. Mandalore is strong on her own. We do not need the Republic because we have ourselves. Duchess Satine is the only leader Mandalore needs, because she sees the people for who they really are, and for who they can really become. I urge the Republic to allow Mandalore to serve its own people, because she has the strength to do so.
The message was sent to Coruscant, along with another message that had been originally corrupted when it was displayed before the Republic a day before. With two messages from her people, Satine realized that her people had her back, but after hearing Skywalker's victory over Pre Vizsla, she knew what he had done. And honestly, even she had to admit she was glad that Skywalker did it. When Satine eventually returned to Mandalore after making the Republic see that Mandalore didn't need the Republic intervention, she would honor Anakin. While yes, she was anti-violent, she knew that Skywalker had morals, and she understood that what Anakin did was a reflection of his father, someone Satine knew very well. When she returned, she congratulated Anakin on his ability to overcome such a daunting situation, and for his ability to show resilience against the will of an overbearing opponent. She told Anakin that her family was his family, and anytime he needed anything, she would be there for him and his mother. She also told Anakin that she would like to have him have the choice to join her cabinet if he would like. Since Mandalore didn't have any traditional knighting ceremonies, Satine's offers were pretty much more than anything Anakin could ever receive from royalty. When Anakin and her met, Anakin tried to give her the Darksaber, but Satine told Anakin that while she appreciated it, she wouldn't take the weapon. It wasn't for her to wield. It was his now. Anakin had no inspirations of using the Darksaber to take the throne from Satine. In his opinion, she was what was best for Mandalore, even taking it a step further, believing that she would be the future of the Mandalorian society, because she stood up to the Republic all alone, and she told off the largest standing and longest standing galactic superpower in history. To Anakin, that was true honor, and that was a true Mandalorian. Anakin would ask, at the very least, what she wanted him to do with the Darksaber, and with the Death Watch members. Satine told Anakin that he could do with them what he wanted to, being that she trusted him as much as she trusted his father, and currently trusted his mother. She believed Anakin would make the correct decision. While Anakin was focused on making the right decision with his new loyalists, which inevitably were becoming Satine loyalists, during the same period of time, two new Sith would rise from the ashes of failure. One being Darth Maul and the other one being Savage Oprez. The two Zabrak brothers would have several encounters with the Jedi and Asajj Ventress, though in the brothers' final encounter with the Jedi they would escape to space via an escape pod. But without Pre Vizsla, their escape pod would eventually slip into a nebula and be sent into deep space by Purrgil, otherwise known as magic space whales, on a great migration to never be seen from or heard from again. The Clone Wars, on the other hand, were heating up. But without Maul or Savage or Pre Vizsla's involvement, Mandalore would stand stronger than it ever did before. Anakin would keep the Death Watch on Mandalore, and he would keep them out of the capital city, having a special facility built for them per permission of the Duchess Satine. See, Satine actually liked the fact that Anakin constructively put the Mandalorians away. While Satine wasn't a warrior, she couldn't pander to a group of people who didn't want to learn diplomacy. And because Anakin was able to pander to their distinct needs by simply kicking the death out of Pre Vizsla, they respected him. And because they respected him, and now served him, they now served and respected Satine, because none of them were going to beat Anakin. That was an especially tough pill for the always bitter Bo-Katan to swallow. On the other hand, something Anakin was working with in the main palace was using the Darksaber. Anakin felt guilty for using the Darksaber away from Satine, because truthfully, he wholeheartedly believed she should have it. She was the embodiment of the Skywalker motto in Anakin's eyes, though Satine wanted Anakin to use the Darksaber and learn how to use it because he earned it, and he helped the people of Mandalore a lot by earning it. Satine and Shmi had their pointers for Anakin in regards to the Darksaber. Yes, even Satine knew, because she was well educated. She told Anakin that the ancestors always talked about becoming one with the blade itself. It was a task that for Anakin was hard to handle, because to him the Darksaber continuously got heavier and heavier the more he used it. But when he listened to Satine's advice about becoming one with the blade, it kind of clicked. Shmi started teaching Anakin about how to use a blade. It had been taught to him before, but not as frequent as blaster training, because not everyone just wields the Darksaber. If only Thej could see his son now. Regardless, the Clone Wars, with heating up, came crashing down into a quick end with the execution of Order 66. The Jedi were wiped out and the galaxy was thrusted into the rule of the Empire. Satine wasn't a fan of this new empire, especially because she was worried about Obi-Wan Kenobi's survival. But Satine above all was a good politician, and she would do everything to keep peace between Mandalore and the Empire, to avoid any unnecessary conflicts, which she maintained expertly. Similarly to how she dealt with the Republic before the war, she dealt with the Empire after the war, with a nominal association with the Empire. Because Satine knew that the Empire was not the Republic, she quickly put together her advisors and submitted treaties to the Imperial Senate that would essentially replicate the same treaties created between Mandalore and the Republic. It was a genius move, because it was early enough into the Empire that it would slip into the desk of the politicians and they would just pass it without thinking about it, and without Palpatine really noticing it. Because most of the Senate saw Mandalore and simply said yes. Because they knew with Satine at the helm of Mandalore, Mandalore wouldn't be at all a bother to the Empire. This would buy Mandalorians safety in the era of the Empire. A few months after Order 66, a hooded man would enter the palace, and when the hooded man entered, Satine's guards almost jumped, but something felt so familiar. She couldn't describe it until she saw the face of a worn Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sidious didn't need an ex machina to win over the Jedi or the Republic. His brilliance alone granted him that ability. With the Jedi mostly wiped out and the Republic having fallen to the ground with the Empire in its place, Kenobi was no longer safe anywhere. Satine knew that, but this could also cause an issue if the Empire knew he was here. But she also knew in a good way of hiding Kenobi. Maybe he wouldn't like it, especially because he did love his beard, but it would at least make Obi-Wan fit in with the rest of their society. And with a slight name change, a name change that Satine had already given Obi-Wan when they first met, that being Ben, all these thoughts ran through her mind. Yes, of course she was happy to see Obi-Wan, but her duty was to her people, and she couldn't risk them being slaughtered by the Empire. With a monarch presiding over the formerly democratic house, Satine knew that Emperor Palpatine could do whatever he wanted without permission from those around him. She looked at Obi-Wan and moved down from her throne to hug him. Kenobi whispered into her ear, telling her that what he said was true. He would have left the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan continued saying that he was hers if she wanted him to be. He'd be hers forever. Satine told Obi-Wan that they would have to negotiate the terms of his surrender. This was of course a little playful, but it certainly was the type of energy and wit that Obi-Wan fell head over heels for to begin with. Satine's terms of surrender would require him to go by Ben Kenobi, to wear Mandalorian outfits, and to shave his beard. Well, Obi-Wan could live with all those. Was Obi-Wan forsaking the way of the Jedi? No, but he was accepting the truth that he no longer had control in the galaxy, and neither did the Jedi. The Jedi were being hunted, and he wanted to restart. Here on Mandalore, he would have that opportunity with the love of his life. But he would also have the opportunity to find happiness the way he should have when he first fell in love with Satine all those years before. Because the original reason she never said the word was because she knew how much the Jedi meant to Obi-Wan. And out of love and respect for him, she wouldn't make him choose between the Jedi or her. It was true love, and it reignited each and every time they saw each other. And that was no exception here and now. Ben Kenobi would be kept out of the public eye. But if people asked where he came from, Satine's simple response was that he was a local from Concordia. The truth is, Satine knew that the relationship would end up in the public spotlight. After all, she was the Duchess of Mandalore. So the two of them would have to create a long-term plan, because at some point they both knew that they would end up married, and so Ben would take her name in becoming a Kryze, rather than her becoming a Kenobi. It would be the safest option for everyone, and that's what Obi-Wan wanted. He wanted people to be safe, and he wanted his love to be happy. And accomplishing that would only fill his heart with happiness. At some point or another, Obi-Wan and Anakin would build a friendship, considering Anakin was consistently around the palace, and so was Obi-Wan. It was just a matter of time until Ben and Anakin became BFFs. Anakin was confused about where Ben came from, but he assumed that the Duchess liked keeping her romantic interests close to herself, and so he didn't question it. There was something that positively happened for the Kryze sisters, since the Darksaber was taken away from Vizsla. Bo-Katan would apologize and make up with her sister, and work on bettering herself as an individual, starting to take responsibility for her actions of cruelty against others. Anakin would as well enter a relationship with a young Mandalorian woman, who was about the same age as him. Her name was Shad Divit, and she was a bit of a scroungy individual, someone who many would have considered a lowlife. But it was because she had lost a good portion of her family. Her father was the sole parent in her life, but he was much older and he wasn't exactly present for her. Shah grew up incredibly by herself, and her and Anakin running into each other was by happenstance, but it was love at first sight. Years after the fall of the Republic, Satine and her cabinet were put through a high-stress situation. Mandalore wasn't typically one to interact with the Empire. It was a nominal relationship. They didn't do much with each other because Satine recognized the issue with the Empire and didn't want their hate to reach her people. But the Emperor in 9 BBY accused Mandalore of conspiring with the rebels, and so an Imperial fleet was dispatched over the planet. Though Satine acted quickly and provided all the evidence of the rebellion or rebellious groups not being present on her planet. While originally the Empire was going to destroy the entire planet, bomb the cities, and kill everyone inside, they decided instead of doing that to send several troop transports of stormtroopers to the ground and scour the cities of Mandalore, searching for the rebels. When the Empire landed, they ripped everything apart. They didn't destroy everything with their weapons, but they tore everything apart with their hands, acting like savage animals, and they found nothing. But all they did was create a disdain for the Empire from the people of Mandalore. Satine was actually really angered by this. She knew she couldn't stand up against the Empire alone, but she also knew that there were others doing that, like Padme Amidala, Bail Organa, Mon Mothma. Those senators took their fight to the Empire and its ways, but it also came with its own risks. Skywalker also had an issue with this, mostly because the Empire threatened his people. A lot had changed for House of Skywalker and House Kryze in the last 10 years. Since the end of the Clone Wars, Satine and Ben had 2 children, one of them being Astrid Kenobi Kryze, who adopted a lot of the same force powers her father had, and a younger brother being Luth Kryze. Luth didn't have a middle name, but he was a son of Satine. Ben's daughter was very similar to him, and Luth was very similar to his mother. But the biggest concern of both of these children was the fact that they were both Force-sensitive, which made them a danger to themselves by simply existing. The Empire was still out searching for Force-sensitive children and beings, though Satine and Ben did a good job of keeping both pregnancies and children from the public eye, whereas Anakin and Shaw had 3 children, all of them carrying traditional Mandalorian names. The first child was their first son, his name being Kumji Divide Skywalker. Shaw and Anakin's next 2 kids were twins, the boy being named after Anakin's father, Thej, and the daughter being named Mayem Skywalker. With the Empire not just threatening the planet of Mandalore, but the families of those with the most prominent voices, their patience with the Empire began to run thin. They knew a straight fight wasn't in their cards, but standing up was. They would slowly but surely work towards assisting the rebellion in the quietest way possible. Anakin and Ben were good buddies at this point, and started preparing the Mandalorian warriors for war. Satine approved of this, because this wasn't senseless war. This was the freedom of those without the power to stand up for themselves. Satine had a voice large enough to keep the Empire at bay, but not even she knew how long that would last. It was, of course, because it would take years, but the rebellion would grow into a very powerful organization, thanks to Senators Amidala, Organa, and Mothma. The rebellion grew much faster and with a lot more unison, and when the Senators of Resistance reached out to Mandalore, they had extra support. The most difficult part about this for Satine was saying goodbye to Ben, as he ran off into another war. While Mandalore's quiet support of the rebellion was never noticed by the Empire, when individuals wearing Mandalorian uniforms started showing up Imperial stormtroopers, it became obvious that there was something larger at play here. Though, through the senators who stood up against the Empire, they were able to form a Reliance fleet that could stand up to the Imperial fleet. Not entirely, of course, but it could stand up in fleet-to-fleet combat. And with the precision training of a much more united force, the rebellion would take the fight to the Empire. Though once the Death Star was made constructed, it made itself known over Jedha, and the game changed for the Alliance, and the Alliance knew it. So, they played the game with the Empire. They moved their navy to Coruscant, which in turn sounds like suicide, but Admirals Raddus and Akbar had a plan. While the rebellion dispersed to secret locations across the galaxy, they moved the rebellion's fleet to Coruscant and engaged with the Imperial fleet head-on. This wasn't an easy fight, but they engaged the Empire on their own territory, so that when the Death Star eventually arrived to put out the flame of resistance, it only ignited resistance. Nothing scares a loyal population into aggression like seeing a moon come out of hyperspace, changing the entire makeup of a planet's gravity. Yeah, Tarkin wasn't exactly a tactical genius, and by moving the Death Star over Coruscant, a planet that had a population of nearly 4 trillion individuals, news traveled faster than it could be suppressed. And soon, it wasn't just the rebellion the Empire had to worry about. It was traitors, mutineers, commanders, generals, the top of the top turning their backs on the Empire and fighting them from the inside out, because again there were 4 trillion people on Coruscant. Many people had family members on Coruscant. Of course, you had your typical lunatics who were on board with contingency plans like Operation Cinder. Not everyone was on board with a Death Star, which appeared to be threatening Coruscant. Obviously, that was not the case, but when the Death Star arrived and the rebellion dipped, it looked like the Empire was trying to stroke its ego. the Galactic Civil War would be longer than the Clone Wars. It'd take a lucky battle to have the Death Star destroyed. Not after it wiped out Alderaan, Chandrilia, Pantora, and Naboo. Though destroying 4 planets really left a negative stain on the Empire, not that even Palpatine could fix that. The 4-year war would come to a close over Jakku, where the rebels mounted up a final assault and defeated the Empire. That is, after an insurgency on Coruscant took over the Guard and resulted in the death of Palpatine. For the heroes of the war, especially those from Mandalore, they would finally return home, and it was a great gift. Kenobi was finally able to see his wife and his kids, who had grown oh so much while he was away. It didn't mean that he and Skywalker didn't keep in contact with their families, because they did. It was just a matter of seeing them in person that changed everything for both of them. Though with the Alliance taking over the mantle of the galaxy, and the Sith being extinguished in the galaxy, it would find peace.
As for our heroes on Mandalore, they too would ride out the rest of their lives in complete and utter joy, living and sharing each and every moment with those they love the most, teaching them the lessons they spent an entire lifetime learning.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Pimp Daddy Bane, Darth Cheesy, Darth Revan, Apollo, Madman Studios, Anakin 003, Lemon Knight, Flynn Van Cease, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Hit 2,000 likes on this video. I don't know what's coming next, but it is. If you want to see a what if, let me know below. I read comments. I don't do crossovers. We got the miniseries coming out on Saturday. Get pumped. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for you guys to see it. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. And otherwise, let's tell our story. So first things first, I want to talk about the real world connection here. Kiado, that's not a real thing. I made it up, but it's also based off of Aikido. So if you've ever done, I think Aikido is a type of karate. I can't remember, but Aikido is you know, it's the art of defense. It's like an art of defense, and so I was like, that'd be cool. That'd be a cool, like, pop culture reference, or like, I guess a life reference. I don't know, but that was like an Earth reference, I suppose, and kind of changing the name up. So if you were like, oh, Kiado, that sounds familiar, there's a reason it sounds familiar. It's Aikido, that one martial art that's like a lot of fun. Anyways, otherwise, let's talk about the rest of the story. This was a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really happy with how the story turned out. Now, there's a lot of ways you can approach this, and I think I'm going to approach this video several different times in the future. I think there's several ways that I could approach this video differently, and it's not saying that I wrote a bad story here, because I actually really think this is probably one of my better stories that I've done lately, which, you know, I think it's pretty good. I hope you guys like it. But this story, like this story in general, I wanted to focus on a story without the Force. Reason being is the Force is like an ex machina. It comes up all the time, and it's like, you know, oh yeah, Anakin have this God complex. I don't want Anakin to have a God complex. Like, sometimes I just kind of want him to be a character, because that's kind of fun. Again, I talk about this every so often, like the Superman complex. Like, I don't want him to be like Superman. Okay, I want him to be human. You know, obviously Superman has values that we can all relate to, but I want him to be a character that has the ability to lose. Obviously, I know you guys don't like when I kill him off every other video, but you entice me to do it, so I can't resist the urge to do so. It's not my fault. But in all seriousness, like, this story is a lot of fun because I got to make Anakin Skywalker like a Mandalorian, you know? And so I got to have fun with that. I mean, there's different ways you can approach this. You can approach this from a purist way, you can approach this from a Satine way. And I kind of wanted to go with it at both ways. And that's something that you don't expect, because I know you guys know that I like Satine, and I like the Mandalorian the Mandalore you see in the Clone Wars before, you know, Bo-Katan ripped that apart, and Maul and all that stuff. I just like to blame Bo-Katan. That's not my fault. That's a running meme on this channel. Come on, I have to live it out. And so, you know, I wanted to have a little bit of both, because I know you guys love the pure Mandalorian, so I was like, I want to combine both elements, but also make it make sense. And so Anakin has an actual father in the story. He's not just like born of the Force, like Shmi isn't this, like, you know, gifted by this presence in the Force, you know. It's like he's got an actual family lineage, and I wanted that to be something integral here, because like I want Anakin to be like a real person. I want him to be like, you know, not like the Force is going to make them do X, Y, Z, and not going to make them do whatever. So I wanted Anakin, yes, to be maybe the chosen one of his own people, but like feel like he was at danger. I feel like he's not just this chosen one that can't die, even though I've proven many times that he can die, because, you know, I'm a savage like that. And so this was fun. I like this. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, because I spent a lot of time working on it, and I was saving it for Mandalorian Season 3, and I'm very excited for you guys to see it. I really am, because like, this was a lot of fun. This was fun, having him get the Darksaber, but also kind of like being like an aristocrat in his own society, and so he's not like, oh, I want to take the throne from Satine, because again, I've kind of proven why he wouldn't want to do that. I've proven like why he sees issue with the purest Mandalore, but he also is like, I can think for myself, and I don't think, you know, peace is the only option all the time, you know? And so I hope you all enjoyed. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love. Get ready for the miniseries. It comes out on Saturday. And always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.